Hi guys, my name is Winter and welcome to my guide on Gloria Victis. So the first thing that any new player will be doing is creating and customizing their first character. So as you can see here, you've got the option of choosing one of the three factions. One of those factions might get some buffs if they're considered weaker than the other two. That will display on the screen. Next up, you get to choose your character's appearance. Spend as much time as you want here. I've picked some tattoos and long hair. That's my personal preference. You might not like that style. Lastly, you get to name your character and choose one of the archetypes. Now, I will say, no matter what archetype you choose, you can freely change your attributes and abilities as many times as you would like, up until at least level 89, so don't worry with what you choose here. You might be tempted to dive straight into the game, but I just want to point out that you can create a further 2 characters for absolutely free. So even though you've created your first character, you might want to try a different build, and you certainly have that option. I think that's a very good aspect of the game, as many other games would have locked that through some sort of grind or a paywall. But if you want more than 3 character slots, you do have to grind. It might take you a little while to earn the contribution points. So let's dive straight into the world of Gloria Victis and check it out. Anytime you log in, you'll likely be in your faction's capital city. But if, for instance, you've logged off elsewhere, you might be put back to that exact spot or to the nearest location that your faction currently owns. So for any new player, you'll always find yourself in your faction's capital city. Have a little look around and familiarise yourself with your capital city. You'll find that you've got crafting stations, you've got inns that you can play dice, interact with NPCs to buy tools, recipes, food, and you've got your global marketplace where you can buy and sell items. You've got your depot where you can store items safely. You've got your stable masters where you can manage your horses and upgrade those. And then you've got your fast travelling where you can go through the world extremely quickly. There is lots of interest in the capital city, but I will let you explore that in your own time. The first thing that I recommend any new player to do is start the beginner questline. So it's a series of linear quests that introduce you to all the mechanics in Gloria Victis, but bear in mind when you're doing these quests, eventually you'll end up in PvP enabled areas where you can get looted, but you'll notice that on the top left where you're in a loot zone or a non-loot zone. So let's start the first beginner quest and I'll briefly talk about some of the mechanics that you'll likely see. Very early on in the quest line, you're introduced to the siege mechanics. It's only a brief introduction, but it tells you how to use ballistas and trebuchets. One's a defensive siege engine, the other one's an offensive. You have got other siege like mantlets, battering rams, catapults, flamethrowers. There's not much to these siege engines, you've just got like a little power bar down the bottom, and it is a little bit of randomness on where they hit, so you won't always be able to land your shots. And just bear in mind that you also have ammunition. So quite luckily I had enough ammo to actually land that shot there. This is a little bit later in the quest line. Now this is in a loot zone, so I need to be careful. As you can see here, the combat mechanics is fairly diverse. You've got 3 blocking directions and 4 attacking directions. You can also throw weapons which are pretty lethal from close range. You've got archery, 2-handed fighting and 1-handed fighting. I'm primarily a 2-handed player, but I'm just demonstrating the mechanics here. Once you throw a weapon, you're open to an attack, you're unable to block, and you can also be caught off guard where you're stunned from a kick, or if you have no stamina left and you try and attack, again you may be stunned or staggered. There is more advanced combat mechanics such as chambering and fainting, but that's something that you'll learn through versing other players or maybe against NPCs. So you might have noticed that I had a horse on the last clip there, and they are pretty vital in Gloria Victis to travel around quickly, and you can also fight from horseback. So there's specific classes for mounted knights and mounted archery. Now, in order to get a horse, you just tame one in the wild. They're not randomly spawned at the moment, they're in predefined locations, and there's a little mini game that I believe improves the RNG chance of a better horse. Now, what you're looking for is a low age and a high level. You want the best horse possible. So let's try and tame this horse and see what we get. Not the best stats by a country mile, but we'll use the horse as a demonstration. Let's head back to the capital and check out the horse at the stables master. That's where you manage your horses with your training and applying stats. There's 4 main attributes to the horse. Vitality, which is your health and health generation. Condition, which is your stamina and stamina regeneration. Dynamics, which is how quickly you can accelerate. And finally agility, which is your turn rate. Typically I put points in dynamics and agility, but feel free to put the points in whichever you would like. Now you can also increase the limit of mounts that you own. Those are unlocked by contribution points, which are earned through PvP and PvE. But you're on your travels and you've noticed that you've been leveling pretty quickly. You might be wondering, why is that the case? Well, the game wants you to be on a level playing field as much as possible, but your attributes and your abilities are only the first tier of your character. You also have the character progression system, which will only expand in the future. So I'm level 49 in this example, and as I previously mentioned, you can freely change your attributes and abilities as many times as you want, as long as you don't reach level 90. Now, if you do reach level 90, any selected ability and attribute will be locked in place, and you'll need to unlock the attribute and ability skill books through contribution points. So I reset my stats, and as you can see, I'm selecting abilities and attributes. So abilities complement your attributes, but some of them are really important. So take a look at some of the skills in the top level of a tree and see what those do. Some of them are very common, like Unstoppable, Survival Instinct, Not My Watch. In terms of your attributes, you've got Strength, which scales with axes, swords, spears, and blunt weapons. Then you've got Constitution, which is your health and your stamina, including the regeneration of both. And finally you've got Dexterity, which scales with bows, knives and swords. You will notice each time you change your attributes or even your abilities that your statistics are changing on the left. Moving on to your weapons and armour. This is a major part of your character. I'm going to demonstrate what the difference between armour types are and what it will do to your statistics. And then I'll compare it to a high level, fully equipped build and you'll see the difference. Now, when it comes to armour and weapons, you have to unlock through the character progression tree, and in order to do that you have to use a lower tier weapon or armour to unlock a higher tier, and then eventually you'll have an orange high tier item and you'd be able to get the best benefits in the game. It shouldn't take you too long. It's all depending on how many hours you invest and if you're doing a lot of PvP and fighting. I'm swapping out my medium chest piece for a light armour just to demonstrate the effect that has on your defensive stats. Now the key thing to note here is you have parts of armour set, so you get a bonus if you wear 4 of the same armour type, for example 4 medium, 4 light or 4 heavy, and you can see here it dramatically lowered my defensive stats. So it's always best to wear 4 of the same armour types. Now, also you'll notice that for each piece of armour that you wear, it will increase your stamina drain. It's very important because stamina management is how effective you can be in combat. So if you run out of stamina, you're really leaving yourself to be open to be killed quite easily. I would also recommend that you put a shield on. Although it lowers your damage and increases your stamina drain by a little bit, it's a counter to being shot in the back by an arrow and slowing your character down, so it's important that you wear a shield. So I've noticed my character's starving. You can see that on the top left. You only get some debuffs if you've got that status, but you'll notice a difference between a high level character with a high food level to a low level character with a low food level. So we'll compare both of them and see what benefits you get and why it's important that you increase your food level and maintain your food level. So as you can see, I've just eaten the highest tier of food. I've got a food quality of 9.7 and I've got the highest buffs possible. So let's see how that compares to a low level character. So as you can see, that's a substantial difference between the buffs you get having a high food quality. So eat the best food as much as possible, but if you do eat lower tier food, it will reduce your average food quality. Another way of increasing your stats would be through potions. There is some meta potions such as protection tinctures that reduce the damage received, but they are fairly expensive. So as you can see here, the more potions that you take, you end up getting a drunk status. Now, if you take multiple potions, it may replace the other potion. So if it's the same type, for example, stamina regeneration, health regeneration, and it's like a beer or something like that, or a wine, that will replace the previous buff. But some potions stack together. As you can see here, I've got a couple of buffs, but because I've taken so many potions, I've also got a debuff, which will wear off in time. But combined with all of these buffs, so I've got my food buff, I've got my potions buff, I've got my buff for my abilities and attributes, it's very powerful, and you can quickly see how a higher level or a more equipped player can have an advantage. But based on experience, I quite often beat players with the lowest level account, like level 10 or 15, purely because I've got a very high skill level of PvP. Moving on to the PvP aspect of the game, so that's your crafting and your gathering. There's quite a substantial amount to do. So you've got your fishing with the fishing minigame, you've got farming, so you can farm and plant. You can also milk and shear animals, you can butcher animals and skin them. You've got your mining for raw resources, it's pretty important. But what happens once you get these resources? Well, Gloria Victis has an extensive crafting system, and it ties in between your base crafting professions and then the character progression tree to give bonuses. So let's take a look at crafting our first item and let's see what we can get. So you can see here, without the crafting station, you get a certain percentage of bonus to get a higher tier item. And look at the bonus you get when you enter the crafting station. It's always advisable that you craft at a crafting station in the highest level crafting station possible. So fingers crossed that we get like a +5 or a +6. And a good note, and I also forgot to mention that you get a higher crafting chance the more mentor points you get. I believe it's like 1000 mentor points is maybe the hard limit, and then it's diminishing returns after. I wasn't expecting that. First try and I got the highest tier that you can possibly craft, a +6. Now there is one level above this, +7, but you have to reinforce the item to get to that level, and from a new player's perspective, I wouldn't attempt it. It's not worth it. you'll most likely fail and the item will be destroyed. Another important aspect to the crafting and equipment system is reinforcement kits. So they are designed to repair your item to full durability, but there's a small risk that you can lose the items. Now you get an improvement chance through some buffs that you get, but also your mentor points. Typically new players will repair the items at NPCs, but it's highly recommended that you don't do this, as reinforcement kits can extend the life of your item for up to like 2 months. So you're saving a lot of gold by using this method. However, this game mechanic might change in the future. As you can see, I've just fully repaired the item, but if I used an NPC, I would have only had like 5k, 5.5k durability. So use reinforcement kits as much as you can, but please bear in mind of the risk of losing your item. So you might have noticed that when you were questing and you were just minding your own business, there would have been pop-ups for events to join. Now there's different types of events. There's loot-based events and non-loot based events. Some of the events are nationwide and some of the events are limited to a certain amount of players. The events that new players should focus on is Valley of the Death. In fact, new players get priority when joining this event. It's good experience to get better at PvP or even level up your character. You get game modes like King of a Hill, Capture the Flag. It's very, very entertaining. And that game mode is also cross-server, meaning anyone can join from any server. You also have small events like Frontier Pass, Sea Raves. Both of those are non-loot events, but they're limited slots. Or you have Volcano, which is limited slots but loot-based. But all of these events offer great rewards, and it's always recommended that new players join as many as they can, as they offer top tier resources and top tier rewards. Then you have your nation based events, which is siege events. Those are non-loot. That will trigger an attack on or a defense on a location. And then you have events like the Right, Catacombs, Brandon, Sirius or Raggy, and all of those are open world events that are loot based. So bear that in mind. If you join those events, you likely will get attacked, and there's normally always a fight. So I've left combat last for a good reason. It's the most important aspect of Gloria Victis. The only tips and tricks that I can give you is keybind your center block even if you're a mouse player. Mine's is keybinded to spacebar, and there's a good reason for that. When you're rotating your character, it's hard to flick your mouse up and center block, especially when you're spinning and you're blocking multiple opponents. You'll see in the background clip that I often do this, and it's only possible because I've keybind the center block. Another tip is try and use movement as much as possible. And what I mean by that is funnel the players into one another. So have one enemy player behind the other. Even though they can attack through an ally, it's going to be much less damage compared to if it wasn't swinging through that player. You can go in the big arena and train with the NPCs. Again, you can see that in the background. I was only testing out the blocking just for the guide. But overall, the directional combat system is fairly simple, but reflexes and muscle memory will play a huge part in how well you perform. I would still highly recommend that any new player will play with a shield, because you need to progress up to two-handed weapons, otherwise you'll be dying straight away. Players often target two-handed players because they believe they're easy targets, which typically they are. And the other tip I've got is for archery. Now I've got a DPI shift button, which means I click a button and it changes my sensitivity on my mouse. The reason why I've got that is my mouse sensitivity for melee is different for archery, and that's the reason why I can consistently hit my shots. Now you might be different and you can do that, but if you've got that functionality, take full advantage of it, because it's a great help. With that being said guys, thanks very much for watching my guide. For anyone who's not purchased the game, I hope this is giving you a little insight, and maybe we'll see you on the battlefield. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or join the official Gloria Victis Discord. Everyone's friendly and the developers do often respond.